Welcome to my journey home to the Latin Mass. Today I'm here with a potentially familiar figure, Ryan the Retrograde, and he's going to tell his story about his journey to the Latin Mass. So Ryan, go ahead with your story.
Thank you, John, for this wonderful opportunity, and I will tell you my story. So I've been a cradle Catholic. I was baptized as a baby, and like pretty much everybody else, I just grew up with the new Mass. And it was in the year 2000 or 2001 when I was a senior in college. And I was reading some things on the internet, apologetics mostly. And there were some SSPX proponents on there, Sedevacantist proponents. And they were arguing all this stuff. And I started to hear about this Tridentine Mass. And I said, well, what's that? And I had known that, for instance, my mom had told me when the Mass used to be in Latin, the priest said the Mass with his back facing the people, so to speak, and he wore this funny hat. But I, along with a lot of people, had just assumed that the old Mass was the same thing as the new Mass, but in Latin, and the priest faced the other way. So I did some research and found out very quickly it was not the case. They changed the Mass completely to a completely different made-up ritual. And with that in mind, I was really sad about that, and I said, well, something's wrong. We've completely detached ourselves from the tradition. So I looked up where the closest Latin Mass was, and then there were people, this is in the days of JP2 still Pope, 2000, 2001, and people were talking about you need to go to the Indult Mass. And so I looked for that, and I found out, oh, yes, there's this indult, in union with the Pope or whatever at Pittsburgh at St. Boniface Parish. So I talked to some of my friends, and we took and drove down there on a Sunday, and it was the Low Sunday, which is the Sunday after Easter, 2001. And I went down there with these two other guys, one of whom is a Dominican priest now, and the other fellow had been a seminarian, I'm not sure. I ended up being a seminarian for a brief while with Fraternity of St. Peter. But that being said, so I went to that Mass the first time, kind of not knowing what to expect. I think I've mentioned this on the channel before. At that time, there was like no footage of the old Mass on the internet. There was, at most, you could find a little postage stamp, real video of the traditionalist chapel where Father Gomar Tapa was, and he had it was a low Mass, so there was a little postage stamp blurry of a low Mass, so I had no idea what to expect. And I got to St. Boniface, and it's high Mass with the asperges, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on, but it's really beautiful to actually hear Gregorian chant and to hear the priest singing all these readings and everything. I was just blown away. So I think it was maybe, after that first experience, I really felt like this is the authentic tradition of the Catholic Church. And then I became obsessed. And I would, at every opportunity, I would try to attend. And that was like 19 years ago or whatever. And I haven't consistently gone to the Latin Mass throughout that time period. It was really only since Pope Francis that I've become exclusively Latin Mass. I think I've been to one Novus Ordo, maybe two, since Pope Francis has been Pope, and that was only to sing, or in a friend's ordination. I just would not attend a Novus Ordo unless I really, really absolutely had to, or there was a good reason, somebody dying, that kind of thing.
So what Masses were you normally attending then in that time period?
So I would go, that's a good question. When I didn't have access to the traditional Latin Mass, I went to the Byzantine. I was Byzantine I attended the Byzantine for 2 or 3 years. And then it's interesting, when Pope Benedict became Pope, and the Novus Ordo looked like it was heading in the right direction, and I was part of a chant schola, and we sang at both the Novus and the Old Mass. And so it was like, oh, we're on this Reform of the Reformed bandwagon. And basically, as soon as, so that was under the Pope Benedict regime. When JP2 was Pope, it was still either traditional Latin Mass or Byzantine. When Benedict was Pope, it was all three. And then with Francis, it just became, I'm just going to make the sacrifice and go exclusively to the Latin Mass. I was going to the Byzantine like once or twice a year to sing or with friends or whatever. But, the circumstances now is that it's actually more convenient to go to the traditional Latin Mass. And it's my right. It's what I'm familiar with. I'm totally invested in this. And so, now exclusively the Old Mass.
So you were able to see the growth of the Latin Mass following Summorum Pontificum. Did you notice anything immediately or after that or anything?
Well, immediately you had diocesan masses spring up immediately. And one thing that's interesting, as I've said this before to you, when it was back in the days of the Indult, the Latin Mass community was, these places were more fringe. There were a lot of more radical people, angry people, and for good reason, because they had basically been pushed into the catacombs to keep the Old Mass. And so you would go, and it was just a more crazy people, I would say. And not all crazy people are bad. And not everybody who was there was crazy. There were some normies there as well. But the thing that I noticed is after Summorum Pontificum, and you had diocesan priests, just ordinary parish priests who were saying like, oh yeah, I'm going to have the Old Mass, and I'm going to do the Novus Ordo as well. You had a lot more crossover of what I would call normies who were also coming to tradition as well. And I think that you need the whole spectrum. To have a good community, you need the normies, and you need the rad trads, and you need the old pious rosary praying ladies, and the 12 kids, and guys who are just coming in and they're like, oh, what's this? And guys who are interested in a religious vocation. Now it's great because there's a much wider, like the nets have been cast and we've pulled up all kinds of fish here, and they all are attending the Latin Mass. So yeah, to reiterate, it's a different ethos now with the Old Mass, and it's much more widespread. It's much more common to the point where it used to be in the Indult days, people would say like, oh, that's schismatic, isn't it? And well, are they in union with the Pope? And you would get that kind of stuff. And nowadays, it's really commonplace, where I think that the number of Latin Masses has probably tripled or quadrupled since before, let's say since 2001 when I first started attending. It's incredible the number of Mass centers and chapels that have, and even just regular parishes that have started with the Old Mass. And YouTube has been great for that. So yeah.
So the last question I have, I'm sure people caught this, FSSP.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you explain maybe a little bit about your time in the FSSP?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of people are curious, and I do want to point out that people ask about our credentials. Well, Ryan's as close as you're going to get to the FSSP, because the FSSP, they're not, I mean, you have Father Ripperger on YouTube, but a lot of them, they're not really sharing their opinions online. So
Father Ripperger is actually not in the SSP, or not in the Fraternity of St. Peter anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he left and he's now associated with a diocese. So you can see he's even more, as a diocesan priest, he's completely free to give his opinions.
Yeah, until you get one of those old bishops who shuts him down.
And Father Ripperger is very smart. He has many degrees. He knows what he can say, and he knows how to say what he wants to say in the right way.
Okay.
And not raise any hackles or anything. Yeah. So what was your question about?
What was your experience like in the FSSP?
Yeah. So the reason about that is when I was in high school or junior high, I was thinking about a religious vocation to the priesthood. And when I found Latin Mass, I said, oh yeah, this is the real deal. If you want to get ordained to the priesthood and do that, you want to say the Old Mass, you want to get ordained in the old rites. And so I looked at that time as far as in union with Rome, as I would have said it then, you would say Fraternity of St. Peter, Institute of Christ the King. That's all that there was. And Institute of Christ the King was in Italy. The seminary is, the education is in French. And then you have Fraternity of St. Peter, who's in Nebraska, and it's in English, and so it was just much easier. So I made a decision to apply to Fraternity of St. Peter. And so I looked at that time as far as in union with Rome, as I would have said it then, you would say Fraternity of St. Peter, Institute of Christ the King. That's all that there was. And Institute of Christ the King was in Italy. The seminary is in France. And then you have Fraternity of St. Peter, who's in Nebraska, and it's in English, and so it was just much easier. So I made a decision to apply to Fraternity of St. Peter. And so I was accepted, and then I discerned that I wasn't actually called to be a priest, and that being a layperson is my calling. So it's a good seminary. It's not perfect, but you can go there and you're not going to encounter any heresies. There's no homosexuality there, and so there's no heresies, no homosexuality. That's 2 H's, and so it's a good place to get your education. But now there's so many religious orders that again have sprung up, and the many canons regular, Benedictines. You can even be, if you find the Novus Ordo acceptable, you can become a diocesan and do both. There's religious orders that do both. So that was the deal with my experience with Fraternity of St. Peter.
All right. Well, that was a great journey home. Thank you for your explanation, your testimony, and thank you so much for watching. This has been my journey home to the Latin Mass, and have a great day.